Hello, this is Gary London of London Moeder Advisors, and I wanted to talk to you today about something that I think about a lot. And to some extent, it's old age, but to a larger extent, it's the fact that, well, look at me, I'm a baby boomer. Baby boomers are people, that cohort of American citizens who are born roughly between the years 1946 and 1964. And by most counts, that's roughly perhaps 78 million Americans. And for all of our adult lives, we have been catered to because we are the biggest sort of 20-year segment of population in America. So wherever we go, we make the market. I remember some years ago when I was reading about this topic, the way to look at it was through the term pig in a python. So if you have this visual of a big python snake swallowing a pig, and you can follow the pig's progression down the snake as it digests this huge beast. And that essentially is what we baby boomers have been in this country for so many years. We have impacted markets wherever we've gone. When we were born mostly in the 1950s, we impacted the hospitals that were giving us birth. We impacted, obviously, the educational system from early education all the way through college some years later. We impacted, popular media and music and culture and politics. The 1960s cultural revolutions and political upheavals, all baby boomer stuff. And so fast forward to today, and baby boomers are, in their, just by virtue of being born from 1946 to 1964, are in their 60s and 70s now. And we are senior citizens. So a couple of thoughts on that with respect to the real estate industry. And this is really where I wanted to go with this. Because there's so many of us, it's been pretty easy for me over the years to talk about what our needs have been in the housing sector. And while a lot of the concentration of my sort of monologues over some of these videos has been of family-bearing year cohorts people, meaning people that are what we'd sometimes call Generation Y, people that are in their late 20s and 30s and 40s. That roughly 20-year segment, which is actually now a bigger segment that has superseded baby boomers. There's roughly 84 million of those people, and they're in need of housing. And we've talked a lot about the kind of family housing that we haven't built, that we need to build for those people. But in doing that, we sort of ignored the people that are my age, baby boomers, in terms of what all of our needs are. And the needs can be fairly obvious as you get older. Obviously, there are going to be huge impacts in the healthcare industry, just as there were when the industry was helping giving birth to us. Now the industry needs help caring for us as we get older and as we ultimately die. So that means healthcare industry expansions. That means, unfortunately, funeral industry opportunities and expansions. And obviously it means lots of housing opportunities that we should take a look at. So how do we sort of translate that into housing needs going forward? Well, one of the big things about baby boomers is that many of them, if not most of them, are not acting like their parents did when they got older. For instance, most own their own homes, and many want to age in place. That's an issue in America, because if people are able to age in place just because they're healthier or because they're just techniques available to them, and I should say technologies available to them that allow them to age in place, it could mean that housing is not available for younger people, and that sometimes is an issue. That and affordability, because a lot of baby boomers live in homes that younger people, Generation X, Generation Y, and beyond, really can't afford. So how do these people stay in their homes? Well, they have low mortgages, usually at low mortgage rates. Many of these homes are paid off because they've been lived in and owned for many years. Some have reverse mortgages on them. Some have become multi-generational housing. In other words, not only is the boomer in the house, but his and hers children or perhaps even grandchildren are in the homes too. They're sharing because of housing needs on a multi-generational basis. So that keeps the stock off the market. And then there's also different kinds of housing alternatives that are available, particularly as boomers get older, including various kinds of assisted living or assisted care levels of housing, which are also growth areas for the housing market over the years. What I didn't talk a lot about yet is what happened with my parents and with other parents, and that is the move to retirement communities. We think as analysts that 10% or less of people are going to actually move to retirement communities. I don't know that that particular delivery system is a boom and that it was for previous retirement generations. We don't get old the same way as our parents and grandparents did. Our life expectancy is much closer to 80 now. And our health expectancy during that period of our life tends to be better as well, because we know more about how to live longer and live better. So the other thing that we saw is the where will people move to when they eventually decide to retire and or decide not to live in their own homes. And traditionally that's been in the so-called Sunbelt states like California, but particularly places like Arizona and Florida and some other places. Will that continue? Probably not at the same level that it has continued historically, because these areas aren't as cheap as they used to be. There's not as much available housing as there used to be. And I think climate change plays a role here as well, which is to say that these places are getting much hotter and much more uncomfortable. So I don't know that we're going to see sort of the same kind of whole movements to retirement communities or whole movements to the so-called Sunbelt states that we saw in the past. We'll see enough of it, but probably not as much as before. So that leads me to sort of posing the question, what are the opportunities here in light of what the current real estate conditions are? And I think that I'm speaking to you at a time when, for instance, the office market has been devastated by virtue of the fact that, and we've talked about this a lot as well in previous videos, that not as many people are going back to the offices in the post-COVID era. We're seeing a lot of flex office space, and we're seeing the need for office space just generally compress industry by industry, company by company, such that the current inventory of office space around the country is much more highly vacant than it's ever been in my entire adult life, in my entire career. That could present an opportunity for baby boomers if they do want or need to leave their homes. We've got a lot of empty office buildings that can be, to some extent, converted to residential. Now, there's a lot of problems in converting a lot of existing office buildings into residential, but there are also opportunities. And it's not just general housing opportunities, it could be opportunities for various kinds of senior housing. So that's one thing to be thinking about. The other thing in terms of a broader context is that this compression of office space demand, coupled with a similar compression in the retail sector, has caused sort of the potential for decimated downtowns, whole corridors of downtown districts in major American cities that are in need for infusion, new thoughts, new uses, new ways to occupy the spaces that formerly were occupied for offices or for retail on the ground. And so the opportunity in the senior market could present itself there as well. The other opportunity that we probably ought to look at in terms of housing is the idea that housing for seniors can be smaller. We just don't need the big homes that have become more characteristic of how baby boomers have purchased housing in the past. Homes that well exceeded the homes that they were raised in, which were on average 1,500 square feet in the 1950s and 60s, to much larger than that, 2,500 square feet or greater in a lot of communities as the 1970s and 80s and 90s and beyond played out. And so a lot of these boomers are living in bigger homes, and one alternative is to trade down those homes for smaller homes. And so the opportunity for builders to build smaller homes is there. I've been promoting the idea of infill through townhome and row home constructions, which would normally be housing that would be 1,000, 2,000 feet in size, sort of back to the future size, but in townhome or row home configurations where there wouldn't be front and backyard. Well, seniors don't need front and backyard. They do need community. And if you do infill projects of this sort in communities, they can be very attractive to seniors as well. And then there's some sort of edgy sort of ideas for seniors to be accommodated in. One is different kinds of communal living, particularly for more moderate income seniors. SROs, single room occupancy units, had been historically very popular for low income seniors, and we should legislate opportunities for those to come back. And other kinds of communal living where seniors can be housed together, but not necessarily in a negative context. So here's a good example. There have been programs associated with college campuses where senior housing is brought into the campuses in a way to enrich or enliven the campuses in terms of their revenue potentials, but also as an attractor to seniors to actually take classes at universities and to live on campuses. And this kind of a concept can morph into different kinds of mixed use opportunities as well. We really have not done enough in America in terms of developing enough mixed use community ideas. And I think that seniors could really play a role in populating potential mixed use communities, new communities and infill communities. And when I say mixed use, I mean, for instance, we've done a lot of work in large regional shopping centers, which don't need to be large regional shopping centers anymore. So we're working on one project, or a couple of projects actually, at the moment. This is just most recently, because we've done a lot of this kind of work, where we add large, dominantly residential elements to what formerly were retail projects. In other words, compressing the retail footprint, but expanding the housing footprint, a big portion of which could be various kinds of senior housing accommodating baby boomers going forward. Because traditionally, these kinds of locations are central locations. They're transit oriented. They're where transportation is. They're where all the action is in terms of different needs, different retail needs, different service needs, different hospital needs, and so forth. So I think that the bottom line of this is that there's been a lot of discussion on the needs of first-time buyers to get them into the housing market to accommodate growing families. But we have almost lost track of the fact that if that's the biggest population cohort, and it is, the second biggest population cohort until we start to really die off, remains we baby boomers. And we ought to really be directing a lot of our policy and entrepreneurial attention to that market. So thank you again for watching, and I will see you soon.